Should there be for me an enemy, I will write to my brother, and my brother will dispatch to the land of Egypt armor, arms, and everything concerning my enemy. Letter from Tushratta, Amarna Letter 24. Tell El Amarna, one of the most famous sites in ancient Egypt and home of the famous king Akhenaten and his religious revolution. But here were also found some of ancient Egypt's most important texts that detailed international relationships. In these letters, the story of a Syrian king unravels. The tragic story of Tushratta is told through a collection of ancient documents in the form of letters and treaties. It's a rare example of real drama in ancient times worthy of film adaptation today. It's a story that needs no embellishment. Who was Tushratta? What was threatening his kingdom? Why did his alliance with Egypt begin to fall apart? What were the catalysts that spurred one of the most significant political upheavals the ancient world had ever seen? In this episode, I will answer all of these questions and more. I'm your host, Brianna Jackson. Join me in exploring ancient lives on the Nile. I seized the southerners under the command of Amun-Re's spirit, and the northerners in accordance with his guidance. The Victory Stela of Thutmose III. The ancient Egyptian New Kingdom began with the 18th dynasty and the reign of King Ahmose. Before his reign, northern Egypt was under the control of the Aamu, or Hyksos, who made up the 15th dynasty, while concomitantly in the south the 17th dynasty ruled from Thebes, and a more mysterious, unnumbered dynasty seems to have ruled from Abydos. The last kings of the 17th dynasty at last rose against the Hyksos, and after generations of war, King Ahmose successfully expelled the Hyksos from Egypt. Thus the age of the great Egyptian Empire began. The Egyptian Empire was exponentially increased during the reign of Thutmose III, who extended the northern Egyptian border all the way to the ancient Mitannian kingdom, now modern-day Syria. He achieved this during his military campaigns there, particularly his famous battle at Megiddo, multiple battles at Kadesh, and other notable Levantine cities, and the capture of Joppa by one of his officers. Thutmose III's conquests are commemorated on several monuments in Egypt, Syria, and deep into Upper Nubia, and these texts have allowed archaeologists to reconstruct his campaigns in relative detail. The texts describing Thutmose III's battle at Megiddo are especially interesting because they reveal specific military tactics that led to decided victory. For instance, he took a huge risk and led his army through a narrow pass that could easily have led to disaster. His officers advised him against it, but his intuition turned out to be correct. In a later battle against the Mitanni, he had boats built at the coastal city Byblos, and then these boats were transported across the land to the Euphrates River, and his army sailed up the river to the Mitannian kingdom. In the land of Mitanni, which its lord had abandoned in fear, I damaged his towns and his people, and I set fire to them. My majesty turned them into ruins so that they could not be reconstructed. I captured all their people. Their districts were massacred. Now my majesty traveled to the ends of Asia. I let many ships be constructed of cedar. They went before my majesty to cross that great river that flows between this foreign land and Mittani, a king who is lauded for his arms in battle. He crossed the Euphrates after him who attacked him, but he fled from his majesty to another land in fear. The Victory Stela of Thutmose III. To maintain Egyptian control over the Levant, Thutmose III instituted a vassalage among the captured Levantine cities. Rulers of these vassal states sent their eldest sons to Egypt to be educated in Egyptian customs, such as reading and writing the Egyptian language and learning Egyptian religion, before being returned to their place of origin, where they would eventually rule under Egyptian influence. Mittani would continue to be problematic for the Egyptian Empire until, during the reign of Thutmose III's grandson, Thutmose IV, a diplomatic union was struck with Mittanian king Artatama, who sent one of his daughters to Egypt to marry Thutmose IV. Thus a precedent was set for dynastic marriages of Mittanian princesses and Egyptian kings, and in the reign of Amenhotep III, son of Thutmose IV, 2 such marriages took place during the reigns of 2 Mittanian kings. These kings were Shatarna and his son Tushratta. Year 10 under the majesty of Amenhotep, ruler of Thebes, given life, and the great king's wife Ti. The name of her father is Yuya, the name of her mother is Tuya. Marvel brought to his majesty Giluhepa, daughter of the prince of Mittani Shatarna, and 317 women of her entourage. The commemorative Giluhepa scarab. Amenhotep III's reign was the height of Egypt's golden age and held the standard for peaceful diplomatic relations with not only the Levant and Mittani, but also the Babylonian and Hittite empires. This is detailed in a collection of letters known today as the Amarna Letters. My father loved you, and you in turn loved my father. In keeping with this love, my father gave you my sister. May my brother seek friendship with me, and may my brother send his messengers to me, that they may bring my brother's greetings to me, and I hear them. Letter from Tushratta, Amarna Letter 17. The Amarna Letters are a collection of 382 clay tablets that are the correspondences with the vassal rulers of the Levant and the kings of the Near East. Most were written in the international language of the time, Akkadian, and were inscribed with the cuneiform script, which was developed in Mesopotamia even before hieroglyphs were developed in ancient Egypt. The Amarna Letters were discovered at the ancient site now called Tel El Amarna. This was the capital city founded by Akhenaten in the 5th year of his reign. Anciently, it was called Akhet-Aten, or the horizon of the sun disk. The letters are addressed to both Amenhotep III and Akhenaten, and it has been argued that a few are addressed to Tutankhamun. One letter is addressed to Amenhotep III's chief wife, Queen Ti. A commoner by birth, Ti became internationally respected by foreign kings. Generally, letters between kings followed a standard language formula. Kings addressed each other as brother, and in the opening of each letter greeted each other's families, subjects, and even horses and chariots. The letters were often filled with exaggerated and saccharine language, and complaints were prefaced by expressions of brotherly love. Letters closed with an inventory of greeting gifts that were sent with the messenger to deliver to the letter's recipient. I herewith dispatch to my brother 1 necklace of genuine lapis lazuli and gold as the greeting gift of my brother. May it rest on the neck of my brother for 100,000 years. Letter from Tushratta, Amarna Letter 21. Among the surviving letters, 13 were sent from the Mittanian king Tushratta, who may have come to the throne within the last decade of Amenhotep III's reign. At this time, Amenhotep III had already been married to Tushratta's sister Giluhepa, and many of his letters indicate he was attentive to her well-being, including sending greeting gifts to her as well as to Amenhotep III. Very quickly, Tushratta arranged for a marriage between his own daughter Taduhepa and Amenhotep III, and his letters reveal a long-term negotiation period during which time he expected the delivery of unworked gold and other prestigious gifts as part of the bride price, as well as to fund the burial monument of his father Shatarna. I now hereby write to my brother, and may my brother show me much more love than he did to my father. I hereby ask for gold from my brother, and the gold that I ask for from my brother is meant for a double purpose. One for the mausoleum and the other for the bride price. May my brother send me in very great quantities gold that has not been worked. In my brother's country, gold is as plentiful as dirt. Letter from Tushratta, Amarna Letter 19. The infamous drama of the golden statues that would become the main focus of Tushratta's anger toward Akhenaten actually began with Amenhotep III. And this is something that's not mentioned with any great emphasis in scholarship today. Most of the blame is placed on Akhenaten usually. In Amarna Letter 19, Tushratta writes to Amenhotep III asking for unworked gold. In Amarna Letter 20, Tushratta writes to Amenhotep III to tell him that he received them. But when he receives them, right away he senses something is not right. He orders his officials to cut open the gold, and he sees he's been deceived because the gold is hollow. He admonishes Amenhotep III, but in keeping with the decorum of diplomacy, he assures Amenhotep III that he's not angry, and he very kindly requests for the statues again. Despite Amenhotep III's transgression, Tushratta sends his daughter Tadu-Hepa along with a sizable dowry to Egypt. The prestigious gifts were recorded in an inventory list and included household items, military equipment and armor, horses, clothes, personal cosmetics, and jewelry. Another letter records an uncommon event, and it is unclear whether it occurred simultaneously with the delivery of Tadu-Hepa or sometime afterward. Tushratta sent a statue of a prominent Mitannian goddess named Shaushka to visit Egypt and then return to Mitanni. Shaushka of Nineveh, mistress of all lands, said, "I wish to go to Egypt, a country that I love, and then return. Now I herewith send her, and she is on her way. Now in the time of my father, Shaushka went to this country, and just as earlier she dwelt there, and they honored her. May my brother honor her 10 times more than before." Letter from Tushratta, Amarna Letter 23. The letter is remarkable not only because of the event itself, but also because it is the only surviving letter from Tushratta that is dated. It is inscribed in Egyptian hieratic at the end of the letter and reads, "Year 36, 4th month of winter, day 1. The king was in the southern villa of the House of Rejoicing." This reveals that the letter was brought to Amenhotep III at a site on the west bank of modern-day Luxor. Anciently, the site was called the House of Rejoicing, and now it is known as Malkata. He founded the city in the 30th year of his reign on the occasion of his first Jubilee festival. The Jubilee festival was a royal celebration dating as far back to the First Dynasty. Traditionally meant to be celebrated in the 30th year of a king's rule, it marked a ritualistic rejuvenation of the king's virility and re-authenticated his kingship. The festival was subsequently celebrated again every 3 or 4 years. Amenhotep III took this celebration very seriously, and in an effort to maintain the integrity of the ancient ritual, he had his officials research the ancient traditions of the ceremony. Malkata was built for the purpose of celebrating his first Jubilee and the 3 that followed thereafter. On this occasion, he also deified himself and adopted the epithet Dazzling Sun Disk. The arrival of the goddess Shaushka has often been interpreted as Tushratta's effort to aid a sickly Amenhotep III. However, this was not Shaushka's first visit to Egypt. Tushratta mentions that his father Shatarna had also sent the goddess Shaushka to Egypt, though this event does not have a date. Shaushka's visit during Tushratta's reign took place during the same year as Amenhotep III's third and final said festival, Jubilee Festival. If the first visit coincided with Amenhotep III's 30th regnal year and thereby his first Jubilee celebration, then it is likely the goddess was sent to witness the god king's rejuvenation and redeification, rather than as a talisman to cure him of illness. In his final surviving letter to Amenhotep III, Tushratta requests what would soon become the infamous statues that would upset the stability of the Egyptian-Mitannian alliance. And may my brother make me rich in respect to my land, and may my brother not distress my heart. I have requested from my brother a molten gold image of my daughter, and next may my brother give me an ivory image. Before earth and before the heavens are the words spoken. As they should be spoken, so shall it be. This molten gold image is Tushratta, the daughter of Tushratta, the lord of Mitanni, whom he gave as wife to Amenhotep III, the lord of Egypt. And Amenhotep III made a molten gold image, and, full of love, dispatched it to Tushratta. Letter from Tushratta, Amarna Letter 24. Amenhotep III died in the 38th year of his reign, just before what would have been the celebration of his 4th Jubilee. The throne passed to his second eldest son, Amenhotep IV, who would later change his name to Akhenaten. When my brother Amenhotep III went to his fate, it was reported. When I heard, nothing was allowed to be cooked in a pot. On the day I myself wept. On that day I took neither food nor water. I grieved, saying, "Let even me be dead, or let 10,000 be dead in my country, and in my brother's country 10,000 as well. But let my brother, whom I love and who loves me, be alive as long as heaven and earth." Letter from Tushratta, Amarna Letter 29. Akhenaten ascended the throne in around 1352 BC, originally ruling from ancient Thebes or modern-day Luxor. Almost immediately, he set about installing a new religious program that included modified architecture and art style. In his 5th year, Akhenaten founded a new capital in the middle of Egypt, now called Amarna, and a large portion of elite and non-elite people, together with the royal family, moved there. This site became the primary cult site of Akhenaten's preferred god Aten, or the sun disk. However, a portion of the Amarna letters addressed to him, if not all, were sent to his residence at Thebes, and therefore date to the earliest years of Akhenaten's 17-year reign. Furthermore, Akhenaten inherited his father's foreign wife Tushratta's daughter Tushratta. Perhaps to cement this transfer of marriage, Tushratta sent a second dowry, which is recorded in another inventory of prestigious gifts. Among them were 270 women and 30 men. Following this, Tushratta brought up the subject of the statues that he had requested of Amenhotep III before his death. It seems that Akhenaten had sent him statues, but they did not meet Tushratta's specifications. I also asked your father for statues of solid cast gold, one of myself and a second statue of Tushratta, my daughter. And your father said, "Don't talk of giving statues just of solid cast gold. I will give you ones also made of lapis lazuli." Your father himself recast the statues in the presence of my messengers, and he made them entirely of pure gold. But my brother has not sent the solid gold statues that your father was going to send. You have sent plated ones of wood. Letter from Tushratta, Amarna Letter 27. What is extraordinary in Tushratta's letters of complaint to Akhenaten is that he tells Akhenaten to ask his mother, Queen Ti, about the matter so that she can confirm the details of the arrangement with Amenhotep III. This seems to have come to nothing because then Tushratta sends a letter directly to Queen Ti asking her to convince Akhenaten to send the statues. And his reproach is quite shocking. He reminds her of the words that she'd spoken to him directly, presumably through a letter, and tells her that instead of keeping her word, she keeps silent. In the last surviving letter from Tushratta, The tone and language change from the patient but firm diplomatic language to unveiled anger. He begins the final letter with a detailed account of the diplomatic relationship between Mitanni and Egypt all the way back to the reign of Thutmose IV, who was the first king of the Thutmosid line to marry a Mitannian princess. Moreover, he reminds Akhenaten in no shortage of words how much wealth and prestigious gifts Amenhotep III had given to both him and his father Shatarna. But then Tushratta comments upon the time when Amenhotep III had deceived him with hollow gold, and here Tushratta reveals his true sentiments over the matter. When I saw the gold that Amenhotep III had promised, that it was not gold, and that it was not solid, then I was in even greater pain than before. Moreover, the goods that Amenhotep III gave me, my brother greatly reduced, so I became angry, as was only right. I became extremely hostile. Letter from Tushratta, Amarna Letter 29. In this letter, Tushratta often breaks decorum and uses the second-person pronoun you, which in this instance is both accusatory and defensive. Also, it may indicate that Tushratta was attempting to exert authority over Akhenaten by addressing him in a familiar or perhaps even condescending manner. In Tushratta's final letter, Amarna Letter 29, he is decidedly more aggressive about the statues that Akhenaten has failed to produce. At one point, he essentially even tells Akhenaten, "Look, you're a man now, start acting like one." Akhenaten's reluctance to send the statues to Tushratta is not a trifling matter. The agreement was struck in the reign of Amenhotep III, apparently soon before his death. Tushratta isn't complaining out of petulance or greed, but because of the principle of the thing. He wants the agreement to be fulfilled and promises to be kept. It is likely that the letters from Tushratta were more numerous than what has survived. Also, it must be borne in mind that the letters reveal only one side of the story. The final letter, however, presents what appears to have been a deteriorating relationship. A badly damaged Amarna letter addressed to Akhenaten from a Hittite king contains a dreadful message. Though much of the text has proved challenging for experts to restore and translate, scholars have managed to reconstruct the message. I wrote to you about his murder. His son committed this crime behind his back, together with criminals. They executed this treachery against him, seized him, and killed him. So my brother must know all this before the gods. Letter from a Hittite king, Amarna Letter 43. The letter may be referring to Tushratta. The Mitannians and the Hittites of what is modern-day Turkey were long-standing enemies, often engaging in battles at cities on the borders of their respective empires. Such events are recorded in a corpus of ancient tablets that were found at the Hittite capital Hattusha. During the reign of Tushratta and Akhenaten, the reigning Hittite king was Shupoluliuma, who was likely the king who sent Amarna Letter 43. Among the Hittite texts are tablets outlining a treaty between Shupoluliuma and a man named Shatiwaza. This man was the son of Tushratta. In the treaty, the tragic fate of Tushratta and the subsequent events are recorded in detail. When his son Shatiwaza conspired with his subjects, he killed his father, King Tushratta. And with the death of King Tushratta, the storm god decided the legal case of Artatama. His son brought the dead Artatama back to life. The entire land of Mitanni went to ruin, and the land of Assyria and the land of Alshi divided it between them. But there was confusion among the Mitannians, and the soldiers sought to kill Prince Shatiwaza. However, he escaped and came into the presence of my majesty Shupoluliuma. I have taken up Shatiwaza, son of King Tushratta. I will seat him upon the throne of his father. The treaty between Shupoluliuma and Shatiwaza. It seems that Shatiwaza's reason for killing his father is because Tushratta spent all of the royal wealth. And one must wonder if this mismanagement of finances, if Shatiwaza's story is to be believed, was behind Tushratta's insistence that Akhenaten send him the statues and more wealth besides. Perhaps Tushratta knew he was in a dire situation, and he was trying desperately to fix this. As for Shatiwaza, he found himself in danger of assassination, and he defected to the Hittites for protection, which the Hittite king Shupalululiuma granted. But Shupalululiuma was smart. He was an opportunist. And he saw in Shatiwaza's desperate situation an opportunity to expand the Hittite Empire. In the treaty, Shupalululiuma agrees to protect Shatiwaza and to support his claim to the throne. His price for this, among maintaining peace, was that Shatiwaza must marry one of Shupalululiuma's daughters and raise her to the rank of chief wife. In this way, Shupalululiuma was able to gain control of all of Mittani and transformed what was once an empire into a vassal state. Shupalululiuma did not only aid in the dissolution of the Mittanian Empire, but he was also involved with the collapse of the Egyptian 18th dynasty. Akhenaten died in around 1336 BC and was succeeded by the enigmatic king Smenkhkare. This king did not reign more than 2 years before Tutankhamun took the throne at around the age of 9 years. He married Akhenaten's third eldest daughter, his half-sister Ankhesenamun, but unfortunately he died without an heir, leaving Egypt without a king. Rule inevitably fell to a man not of royal blood, the official named Ai. However, before Ai took the throne, Ankhesenamun desperately tried to seek a foreign prince to marry, because although the prince would be a foreigner, he would still be of royal blood. The Hittite text called the Deeds of Shupalululiuma, as told by his son Mursili II, record a remarkable event where Ankhesenamun writes to Shupalululiuma saying, "My husband is dead, I have no son, I am afraid, give me one of your numerous sons to marry." This just isn't done. And again, Shupalululiuma is smart. He immediately sees a possible trap. This whole thing is very suspicious. Here we have a queen from one of the greatest empires, which is still somewhat a rival of the Hittites, inviting one of the sons of the Hittite king to become the king of Egypt. It's too good to be true. So he sends a messenger back to confirm the queen's message and verify if she is genuine. "Why did you say they deceived me in that way? Had I a son, would I have written about my own and my country's shame to a foreign land? You did not believe me and have even said this to me. He who was my husband died. I do not have a son. Never shall I take a servant of mine and make him my husband. I have written to no other country. I have written only to you. They say your sons are many, so give me one of yours. To me he will be husband, but in Egypt he will be king." The Deeds of Shupalululiuma, as told by his son Mursili II. When the message was conveyed to Shupalululiuma, the messenger reiterated the urgency of the matter in his own words, pleading on Ankhesenamun's behalf. Hearing this, Shupalululiuma consulted previous treaties with Egypt to allay his fears that it was a scam. To maintain peaceful relations with Egypt, Shupalululiuma granted the request and selected his son Zenanza to be sent to Egypt to marry Ankhesenamun. But Mursili's account reveals that Zenanza was killed en route, and it was assumed to be an assassination by the Egyptians. The account of Zenanza's murder is rather fragmentary, so it is not entirely clear what the whole story is. What ended up happening is Ankhesenamun did not marry a foreign prince. She ended up marrying one of her subjects, after all, Ai, who was probably quite old at the time, and again, it resulted in no heirs. And so ended the Thutmose line, which began with the great King Ahmose, who vanquished the foreign enemies and reunited Egypt. Rule was turned over to military men, Horemheb, Ramesses I, Seti I, and of course, Ramesses II, Ramesses the Great. Whatever truth lies behind the mystery of the Zenanza affair, one thing is certain. By the end of Akhenaten's reign, Tushratta and the Mittanian Empire were no more. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time on Ancient Lives on the Nile.